so we're going to get started here. We're going to start with invocation by Police Chaplain Steve Mead, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman Raymond.
Shall we pray? Father, we come to you tonight to ask you to bless this meeting. Bless those that are here doing the business of this great city of Atwater. Father, as we passed Memorial Day yesterday, we humbly bow before you and ask you to bless those families of the lost men and women of military that gave the ultimate sacrifice so that we can be here tonight, that we can discuss business, disagree about business, but do it in a way that is kind to each other. Our officers, Father, in this last month, we also had Officer Memorial, where we recognize those officers that also gave the ultimate sacrifice and died in line of duty. Tonight, we pray for the soldiers that are now on the line, that do stand between us and disaster and attack and those who wish to destroy us, Father, and our police officers and our firemen that also stand locally to make sure that we're safe. We thank you for our officers, Father, for the things that they put themselves through to keep us safe, for our firemen who are willing to run into burning buildings, run into danger so that we can be safe, so that they can protect us. Thank you for all those here. We thank you for our council men and women, city manager, Father, for our city attorney, Father, and for our mayor. All praise be to you, Father, and we thank you for all that you do for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any subsequent need items?
Do the roll call, Mayor?
Roll call?
Please.
Yeah, we might do that. Yeah, it's on there. Yeah,
Thank you.
go for it.
Ambrose is absent. Kale?
Here.
Raymond?
Present.
Rochester?
Here.
Nelson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay,
Mayor-
now do we have any subsequent need items?
Yes. No, there are no subsequent need items, Mayor.
All right. Can I get a approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda is posted.
Second.
Motion by Raymond, second by Rochester. Kale?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Rochester?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, first thing is presentations of our monthly report by Supervisor McDaniel.
Thank you, Mayor Nelson. I have a 20-point presentation I sent over, 20 pages. You want to do that up, Janelle? No, I'm just kidding. I just want to update you on a few items. Our interim CEO, Mark Hendrickson, has been named as interim CEO of Merced County. His background in economic development and leadership at Castle makes him well suited to guide the county during this transition. The recruitment closes Thursday, June 29th. Atwater Merced Expressway, we continue pushing to extend the expressway to Bellevue Road. Funding is in place, and we're awaiting environmental approval. This project is key to improving traffic and supporting the regional commerce. EPA has accepted our modeling, so we are moving forward on this project. Castle infrastructure upgrades are progressing, bringing jobs and investment opportunities. Atwater stands to gain significant activity as it increases. The Board of Supervisors has just authorized a contract with KPMG LLP to conduct a feasibility study focused on the airside of freight and airport potential at Castle. This will be a guide for future planning to position Castle as a major air hub and statewide air logistics. Veteran Services outreach has begun in Atwater for any veterans who are needing more help and expanding help for local veterans access to services and benefits that they've earned. And a special thank you to the Atwater Police Department for their outstanding work in managing traffic through the city during the Luke Bryan concert. Your professionalism, coordination helped to ensure public safety and smooth logistics. Much, much appreciated. You guys were a big help. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
That was short.
Who's the current VSO?
No. He was just here. He just did a presentation a month ago, or 2 months ago. Anyway, I apologize. I don't have his name on the top. He is wearing a cowboy hat now, though, to all the meetings. I do know that. I appreciate. Sorry about that.
So EPA has accepted the modeling for the expressway.
Yes.
So what's the next step?
Next step is completing our NEPA, and once that NEPA is completed, then we can accept the CTC funding. California Transportation Committee has already allocated us that funding, and once it passes the NEPA, it'll be there. And so the fact there's no hiccups now that they accepted our modeling, which is the most important part.
So any kind of a timeline? I know it's always,
My last update, they're saying 2026, we will be putting shovels in the ground.
cool. Great.
And I'm going to try to hold them to
Yeah, I know. I'm
at the end of the year. You know, and construction is in seasons, so it, you know, if we don't make it to the end of that season, it'll go all the way into the spring of the next season.
Cool. Thank you. Any questions? Lisa?
When you talk about the veterans services being expanded to the city of Atwater, can you explain that? Just like, what does that mean?
It was through a report that I got that they were actually looking and focusing for the Atwater. A lot of times their focus are just different parts of the community, and I just got a reminder that they're going to be focusing in Atwater, so I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, I was just wondering if they were going to have like a workshop here in the city, or is that the plan, or?
As I get that information, I'll definitely share it
Okay.
with you. Yeah,
Awesome.
pretty
Thank
sure,
you.
I'm pretty sure that's part of the process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, going to move on to the consent calendar.
Background information has been provided on all matters listed under the consent calendar, and these items are considered to be routine. All items under the consent calendar are normally approved by one motion. If a council member requests separate discussion on any item, that item will be removed from the consent calendar for separate action.
Is there any public comment regarding the consent calendar? Seeing no one come forward, I'm closing public comment. Any items on the consent calendar the council would like to remove for separate discussion and possible action?
Can I have item number 5 set aside, please?
Sure. 5 and 6?
Yes.
Okay. So, can we get a motion for 1 through 4?
I'll move to approve as amended.
I'll second.
Motion by Kale, second by Raymond. Kale?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Rochester?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so now we're on to items 5 and 6. Justin, you want to handle that?
Yeah, was there any certain questions that you had?
I do. I'm just wondering, when we go out to bid for projects like that for the well, do we think about like combining those as 2 bids? I'm wondering if we could have potentially maybe got it cheaper if we would have gone out to have them replace both, because I noticed like we're contracting with 2 different companies, so that was my only question.
No, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be cheaper. They'd be the same price. And then Aqueous Vest doesn't. Their cost is more expensive to do Well 19 because Well 19 vessels are lower. They're below the ground. So they're like, oh, we don't really want to do those ones. And so that's why they were a little bit higher. But normally Aqueous Vest is the lowest. And then the reason we don't is because they kind of compete with each other. So the prices get lower and lower every single time we do this.
Super helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? How about a motion?
Motion to approve.
5 and 6?
5 and 6.
I'll second.
Motion by Rochester, second by Raymond. Kale?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Rochester?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, tonight we have a budget workshop and a presentation of the draft fiscal year 2025-26 proposed budget. In a moment, I will turn it over to Finance Director Nicholas, who will walk us through the proposed budget, outlining the city's financial priorities, major initiatives, and funding allocations for the upcoming fiscal year. During the presentation, City Council members will have the opportunity to ask questions and discuss the budget presentation with staff. After the presentation, we will open public comment. I'd like to take a moment to explain how that's going to work. There will be no time limit for public speakers during the comment period, and speakers can return for more comments during the discussion regarding the items. We do ask that we maintain decorum and everybody stay respectful, stay on topic, and allow space for others to speak. When it's your time to speak, please come forward to the podium, clearly state your name for the record, and share your comments. And with that, I will now invite Anna to come forward and give her presentation.
Am I already on here? Test, test. Okay. Okay, well, good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, audience attendees online and in person. Thank you for the attention. My name is Anna Nicholas, your Finance Director here for the City of Atwater. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you that goes over some of the major items of the proposed fiscal year proposed budget for 25-26. The full draft budget was made available online and it was published on May 22nd. We have quite a few slides to get through, so I'm going to dive right in. Some of them move a little quicker. Some of them at the beginning are a little, they have a lot of dialogue that I'm going to share with you, and then it'll kind of pick up. It won't go this slow. This might be user error. There we go. Okay, so here's our lineup for the evening. We'll do a brief overview of the budget process. We're going to do a fund review of the General Fund, Public Safety Transaction and Use Tax Fund, known as Measure B, the Community Facilities District Public Safety Fund, which is Fund 50/50, and we have a few slides towards the end on the enterprise funds. And this year, each department head has prepared for you a couple slides that goes over some of their achievements the current fiscal year and some things that they're going to be looking forward to accomplishing next year. And then we'll wrap it up with what our next steps are. So as I was pulling together information over the last several weeks and just in thinking about cities in the valley, thinking about budgets, thinking about things that we go through, something that came to me is that we are very fortunate living in the Central Valley in that we experience 4 distinct seasons. And for those of us that have grown up here or spent a considerable amount of time here, those seasons are ingrained in us. And, you know, it might be a sight, a smell, a taste, something that signals you know a new season is being ushered in. And, you know, it might be when you spot the first blossom on a crop tree, or the very first sunflower smiling at you as you're driving down Santa Fe. Well, budgets have seasons too. And, you know, they may not be as fragrant or as tasty or as pleasing as nature's seasons. Nonetheless, they're year-round. They have budget seasons, and right now, the season that we are in is the preparation for our upcoming fiscal year, which is 25-26, and that begins on July 1st. These are some of the first young smiling sunflowers of Atwater taken this year. Budgets serve two primary purposes. They're spending plans and communication tools. So in terms of the spending plan, they're basically balancing incoming resources with outgoing expenses and committing to those expenditures for the fiscal year. And then they're also communication tools because they're conveying to the public the planned, whether it be a planned project or planned expenses for the fiscal year. There are some challenges that we are up against usually each fiscal year as we navigate the budget process. When I presented the proposed budget last year, some of you might recall that I made mention of an item that was like a little gray cloud hanging over cities up and down California, and that was the Taxpayer Protection Act and whether that was going to make it onto the November ballot. And so as public servants up and down California, we were on the edge of our seats until June of last year when the California Supreme Court made the determination that it did not qualify for ballot. So that initiative would have significantly changed the way revenues are raised by cities, which ultimately would change the impact of our service levels. So we are not having to face the challenge of that this year, but nonetheless, we do still have some challenges that we navigate each year. One of the major challenges is there's a disconnect between revenues and the services that are provided using said revenues, in the, specifically for the general fund. This is particularly a challenge post Prop 13 in California, which, as we know, significantly changed the way property taxes raised and in accordance with expenditure needs. And so you saw the rise of importance over the last several decades of other revenue sources such as sales tax and the importance of making sure that we have those revenue streams coming in for the service levels that we commit to. But there's a disconnect because, and sales tax is a classic example of this because you have sales tax as a consumption tax. It's driven by consumer behavior. It may be affected or influenced by inflation or supply, but the services that are committed to pay for with that revenue aren't affected by those indicators. And so there's always that disconnect and a balance of outgoing expenses with incoming resources that don't have a direct correlation with each other. The Bradley Burns sales tax revenue is the second largest source of revenue for Atwater's general fund. Most cities receive 1% of the California base 7.25% rate. Atwater receives 0.95% of the 1%, with Merced County receiving the other 5% of that 1%. A secondary budgetary challenge that impacts local governments is salary and benefits. Salary and benefits can be a budgetary impact of very significant considerations for agencies. Agencies need to remain competitive, attract and retain a high-quality workforce to provide services and achieve the strategic planning goals that are adopted by council and run the city. So sometimes to minimize budgetary impacts, agencies will look at other considerations such as alternative work schedules, maybe hybrid work arrangements. Some agencies have been doing this for quite some time. Others during COVID and post-COVID have pivoted towards looking at some of those arrangements in order to help either enhance budgetary offerings for the employees or in lieu of. And there's a variety of other challenges that impact some agencies, some not so much, but there could be, lack of strategic planning, external economic events, industries, tourism, geography, economic drivers of the region. Atwater's very fortunate to have Highway 99 running through. That's an economic driver that offers retail opportunities that we will see in the form of sales tax. In addition, in the near future, we'll be adding an additional hotel, which is going to add additional transient occupancy tax revenue. And not only the monetary benefit, but it provides a community benefit in terms of people visiting the area. They'll have another place to stay. Our current process here at City of Atwater, after the mid-year budget, all the departments start to compile the information for the upcoming fiscal year. So each department takes their operating expenses and set estimates based on historical data, based on known factors. A lot of times that known factor might be in the way of a contract that the department has, and the vendor has let them know they're going to apply a 5% escalator, and then also planned activities for the department. The revenue estimates are compiled by the finance director, and then some departments, such as recreation, will put in estimates as well based on what they plan with different activities and offerings that might be planned throughout the fiscal year. Then the data is entered into one big budget document. It's currently an Excel spreadsheet. We make revisions as needed. And then each department head meets with the finance director and the city manager. And that's a minimum of one meeting, but no maximum. So we meet as much as we need to and work through the budgets until we come to the final product that we have presented to you in the proposed draft budget. It's frozen, and it probably literally is frozen because it's freezing in here. Well, I won't go back, but there was a quote on there by physicist Niels Bohr, and it's basically, you might be familiar with it. It's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future, and that's a very applicable quote for government budgeting. And while we cannot make predictions about the future, what we can do in the budget process is take steps to improve the reliability of the estimates that we make that help reduce the risks of basically of being really off. So what we've done is take some steps to help try to fine-tune our estimates that we're making so that we can present to you a financially sustainable spending plan. Through our process, myself, the city manager, department heads, we strive to make those reliable estimates as much as possible based on the information that we have at the time. Is it a perfect science? Absolutely not. Budgets are estimates. So what is included in this budget? We have actually proposed to pay off the Atwater's Type 1 fire engine as we put forward in the current fiscal year 24-25 budget. We paid the first of 3 lease payments, but looking at the fund balance in Measure B, we got a payoff quote from the company, and we could save approximately $15,000 in interest if we pay that off in full. And so that is proposed that we do that come September when we are allowed to make the payment for that. There is funding for a citywide document management system. The capital improvement program projects are included in this budget. That program was presented to the Planning Commission last week. There's a 16% increase for our RMA premiums, which is our insurance company. And so that is all the programs that we participate in. Our overall premium increase from 24-25 is 16%. There's a 2% COLA for the Police Officers Association group. CAL FIRE agreement, there's a cost escalator of 5%. There's funding to complete the water meter installation project. There's electric street sweeper funding and funding for a new mower for our parks operations. What is not included in this budget, similar to the current fiscal year of 24-25, there are no COLAs budgeted for non-POA employees, either represented or unrepresented. There's nothing budgeted for economic changes. We simply can't budget for anything that could happen that's out of our control, whether it be inflation or consumer behavior that changes sales tax revenue and those types of things. There's no funding for retrospective adjustments that could occur. And what those are, we pay our premiums to our insurance company, but throughout the course of the fiscal year, they're looking back at previous program years, and if there's any money that we owe them, that comes in the form of a bill. If we've done really good on our claims and we've paid them too much, we get a credit. We get what's called a refund. So we don't know either way at the time that we're putting the budget together, but I will say that there's probably going to be some program years where we're going to be owing. So we're going to need to just factor those in and know that when they come forward, whether it be at mid-year or the next fiscal year, that those will be coming forward. And then any strategic planning considerations, council has an upcoming meeting to start crafting their new strategic plan. And so depending on the results of that, if there's any additional staffing or resources that may be needed to support that plan, we would need to bring that forward in the form of a budget amendment or a mid-year budget, or depending on what it is. Okay, so we're gonna start getting into some numbers. So this is all of our funds that we have. The total revenues that are estimated is 68.47 million, and the total expenditures transfers out is 81.47 million. 16.4 million of that is for our capital improvement program. So when we take that away from the expenditures, we have 65.07 million, and that's what we refer to as the operating budget. So a lot of times you might hear the capital improvement program budget, and you'll hear the operating budget. And we start looking specifically at the general fund, and our next several slides will be over the general fund. So the revenue and transfers in proposed are an estimated 20.6 million, and the expenditures transfer out are 21.1 million. And as you can see, the expenses are over the revenues by 525,000. So looking at that number in particular, that is a deficit number. But there's 175,000 of that is considered one-time spending. So when you take that away, there's 350,893 that is considered a structural deficit. And basically that's the ongoing expenses are estimated to be higher than than the ongoing revenues by that amount. And I keep paused on this one a little bit because this, while it's, you see my little thumbs up and thumbs down. The thumbs up is excellent, that we have done a lot of hard work to get that down, because if you recall, this time last year, we were looking at 1.2 million as a proposed structural deficit, and that was down from about 2 million the year before. So we've done a lot of work at trying to fine-tune some revenue estimates and keep expenses as reasonable as possible without cutting core services. But the thumbs down is no finance director ever wants to have to be able to say, oh, we got a structural deficit. But this is a really good indicator of good progress, I would say. So how did we do that? What are some of the things that we've been looking at to help reduce that structural deficit? So these are just a few of the major items that have helped us. One comes in the form of our revenue estimates. Although sales tax is very flat in terms of sales tax estimates, we typically like to see, I would say, several thousand in our year over year. It just isn't that. However, when we look at it from a conservative to a realistic hybrid approach, we are seeing a little bit, and that's better than not seeing anything. And so that added 246,000 into our revenue estimates. Our property tax in lieu is one of the major sources of revenue as well for the general fund, and then the RDA residuals, which is operates as property tax as well. So those estimates, in addition with the regular modest increases that we have for other revenue sources for the general fund, helped us narrow that deficit. On the expense side, there's some changes in each of the not each of the departments, but some of the departments that have helped considerably. One is the community events. There was a community events coordinator that is not going to be occupied in 25-26. And then in the recreation department, there was a part-time count from 8 part-time recreation workers reduced down to 5. In the community development department, there's some staffing changes that we're looking at. Overall in the department, it did help decrease expenses, mostly in professional services that we're estimating a decrease in expenses. But in terms of the staffing changes, it's what we're looking at as a net neutral. It's helping keep expenses from going up. And this shows you of the general fund. So of that 21.1 million, this is the breakdown for each department and their estimated expenses for fiscal year 25-26. And so for the majority of them, they're pretty much status quo, but you will see City Council looks, you see it went from 25,700 to 71,200. And so what that is we simply shifted some membership cost for MCAG, LAFCO, and League of California Cities, I believe. Those were part of non-departmental expenses, but we're assigning them a department. What we're trying to do is throughout the course of a few years is take some of those non-departmental expenses that get lumped into that department and assign them to a department where they have a home base. And then you'll see on the community development side, that's where we did see some savings that with the staffing changes that are proposed, if those work out well, we hope to have some decrease throughout the fiscal year in professional services. Okay, so now we're getting into the department slides. There's quite a few. I'm going to just read on through them. So these are kind of the exciting. This is where you see where the money's being put to use. So what I have here is the general fund departments, and then once we get into the enterprise funds, you'll see some wastewater and sewer slides. Okay, so for fiscal year 24-25, City Council adopted ordinances and resolutions setting statutory and regulatory policies for the city, held regular and special meetings, streamed live via the city's website, Facebook, and YouTube to keep residents informed of city activities and projects, and through member participation and community events, encouraged proactive resident and business owner involvement in local government. And then looking forward for 25-26, the City Council will pursue policies and fee updates identified in the fiscal recovery plan to close the structural deficit and grow the general fund reserve, and review outcomes from the Citizens Oversight Committee on Measure B to maximize public safety transaction tax effectiveness. For the administration department in the current year, increased public engagement through a multifaceted outreach strategy, including in-person and community meetings, door-to-door project outreach, social media campaigns, and internal employee meetings. Laid groundwork for a multi-pronged fiscal recovery plan to close the city's structural deficit, encompassing a citywide fees and charges review, development impact fees, and cost allocation study. And for the next fiscal year, a couple of the items they'll be working on: implement year 1 of the updated strategic plan, expand performance reporting to improve accountability and service delivery. Current fiscal year for city clerk, completed digitization of archived legislative records for easier internal and public access, expanded overall social media reach by 36%, grew total social media followers across Facebook and Instagram from 7,568 to 9,020, increasing our community engagement footprint by 16%. And looking forward, city clerk goals: launch an online records request portal to improve transparency and responsiveness, and begin early planning and outreach for the 2026 general municipal election. For the finance department, we relocated the finance department to City Hall at 1350 Broadway. We fully migrated all of our active cannabis businesses to the online payment portal, and thank you to our businesses for your cooperation. We upgraded our Springbrook ERP system from the on-premise version to the cloud-based version. And by the end of this year, we'll have processed over 4,000 accounts payable checks for the year and approximately 100,000 utility bills for the year, including monthly delinquents and disconnects. So on that, we process about 7,000 accounts. And so you take that 7,000 times it by 12, and then you add, there's always batches of delinquents and disconnects every month. So it's quite, utility billing is quite a busy operation in the finance department. We look forward to exploring updating the budget reporting process to use available technology that might be available to us in Springbrook, or start looking at new reporting options. And that'll help modernize and update the report. We are going to be reviewing processes, identify ways to streamline and improve timeliness of transaction posting, provide support to achieving City Council's adopted strategic plan, and continue being a community-based resource for our internal and external customers that we serve. For our Human Resources Department, this fiscal year, they streamlined employee performance reviews by implementing an all-digital evaluation process where employees can add their own goals and accomplishments. Launched a new employee digital portal to complete onboarding documents and standardize onboarding across all departments. Began review of employee benefits to ensure the city is offering competitive benefit plans, and began a comprehensive review of city policies. And looking forward to 25-26, our HR department will gather data on employee morale, satisfaction, and organizational culture, and utilize results to inform future HR strategies and improvements. Identify key roles and internal talent pipelines, and work to align staffing levels with long-term service demands and retirements. Implement HR office hours within other city departments for better employee support, and implement electronic timesheets citywide. Current fiscal year for our Community Development Department organized and facilitated the first annual City of Atwater Economic Development Summit, updated parts of the zoning ordinance and standard specifications to facilitate residential development, initiated the environmental review for the expansion of Osborne Park, and implemented building permit processing software known as Cloud Permit. And looking forward, the CDD department will complete the 6th cycle of the housing element, complete the general plan update, implement a digital planning permit software, and streamline planning processes to encourage economic development. And our Streets and Parks Department, for this current fiscal year, a couple of their highlights: replanted trees on Broadway Avenue, completed landscaping improvements at Osborne Park, and then looking forward for next fiscal year, they're going to be working on completing at least 20 sidewalk repair or replacement projects to improve pedestrian safety and accessibility across neighborhoods. And I will say, from a risk management standpoint, that is really good to see. It's one of those things that it's just something that has to get done. We're always wanting our parks to look good, but there's so much else that needs to get taken care of. So that's how we keep our risk management claims down. Continue to perform maintenance citywide, including pothole patching, facility upkeep, and tree trimming. Refresh street striping throughout, that's a mouthful. Refresh street striping throughout the city to improve visibility and safety. And there's some pictures there to show you the a before and after sidewalk repair. And recreation and community events. So for the current fiscal year, some of their highlights: for youth served, approximately 900 youth were registered in recreation programs and the annual Easter event. And adults served, approximately 138 teams were registered across adult recreation programs. And then looking forward for 25-26, expand on paid program and event offerings. Example is indoor pickleball classes, additional youth and adult seasons and leagues. Expand on free program and event offerings, such as youth game nights, increase movies in the park showings, increase chair yoga frequency, and continue upgrades to outdated equipment and enhancing our rentable spaces. Okay, so we're still in the general fund, and this is showing you the general fund reserve policy that is currently in effect, and that is the one that was adopted on March 25th, 2019, which requires us to maintain a 10% reserve of the estimated fiscal year operating expenses. So what this shows you is that we are maintaining that, and in addition, we are meeting the 25% of the estimated general fund expenses. And so in order to get that number, what you do is you take the estimated expenses, that 21.17, and times it by 0.25, which gives you the 5.2 million. So that 5.2 million is your 25% reserve, and then the 10.24 million is the unassigned fund balance. So at the end of fiscal year 25-26, if all of those estimates come in relatively close to the estimates, we're estimating 15.538 million to be the fund balance for the general fund. And that's the thumbs up, that's really good. We've been able to increase our fund balance over the last few years. And this just shows you how good that's happened. Going back to fiscal year 2017 and 2018 are your red numbers there, and then steadily started to increase. And then you got to the last several years, been able to meet the 25% and have additional fund balance. Same data, different format for those that like a trend line. And what I'll say with this, though, when you see the trend line, you always want to make sure it's not taking a sharp dive down. And so what you will see is that it is starting to trend down, and that's because over the last 2 years, actually the last 3 years, we had proposed deficits, structural deficits. There's a difference there. And so some of it is expected when you see it trending down. We know we're using some one-time money for general fund activities, and so we would expect to see that to come down. But what we don't want to start seeing is for year after year a steady downhill trend line. So how have we been able to build up some of that reserve? Let me catch my notes up with the slides here. Well, the general fund reserve policy was a big part of it. That was passed in 2019, and basically what that did is it gave council the guardrail to start preserving that fund balance. You had a policy that you could not spend below a certain threshold. So that's excellent. That's one way we were able to start building up reserve. The second way, it's unfortunate, but COVID happened. And a lot of the projects that may have been spent out of general fund money, we had ARPA money coming in. But the other way that started in the last few years, or last couple years, is our interest earnings have really started to go up. And so with us having the majority of our investments in LAIF, I did a look back at some of the interest rates and to see what was driving our general fund interest earnings up. And so this chart I put together, it went back just to 2019-20. You can see I put each quarter interest rate from LAIF, and then in the column under average, that's just the average of those 4 quarters. So if you look at 2019-20, the average earning rate was 2.06%, and in the general fund, just the general fund alone that we're looking at, we got $31,151 interest earnings for that year. Fast forward to 22-23, and you start to see the interest rates going up. And there's more fund balance to get more money, and that's why you see a larger number that we earned money on. And then this last fiscal year, and these are unaudited for 23, 24, unaudited numbers, but look at how much the interest rates in LAIF have gone up. And our general fund interest earnings went up to $457,932. So it's a great way to grow your reserves. You don't necessarily count it as ongoing revenue to support ongoing expenses because you simply don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. But it's a great way to grow your reserves when they do go up. Now you've got your reserves that you've built up. This chart that I put together just simply shows you your budgets to actuals. And so when we talk about estimates, it's always good to know, well, how close do we come to those numbers? And that kind of gives you data so you know what level of risk to assume when you're approving budgets. And so if we look at fiscal year 2021, fiscal year end 21, the final approved budget was $14.9 million and expense of $15.6 million. The actual was $18.9 million and 15.1 on expense. And so that's a pretty significant difference, and usually there's a story in there. And so I think that year I drilled back, let's see, there was a sale of property that year, and sales tax revenue came in higher than forecasted. And you see that particular year, they had a structural deficit as well proposed of $677,000. So it just kind of goes to illustrate how budgets really are estimates, and there's things that happen throughout the course of the year that aren't anticipated, but it's always good to do a look back on what your actuals were, and if you see any large variances, usually there's a story behind it. It's a one-time revenue or a contract that didn't come to fruition and you're saving on the expense. Okay, we're going to segue from the general fund into Measure B. So our next slides are on police and fire. For 24-25, the police department accomplishments include deploying dash cameras in patrol cars, implementing electronic citation program, and all authorized positions are currently filled. Looking forward, the police department plans to implement a traffic safety officer position, continue efforts to improve recruitment and retention, and continue to update interior of building. There's a lot on the fire. I'm going to read through these. I may get some of these names little. So, Type 6 and Type 1 engines, they enhance response time. Smaller Type 6 engine allows for quicker access to difficult terrain, improving emergency response. And it also helps to reduce wear on larger apparatus, decreases overuse and maintenance cost on heavy trucks like Truck 42. The revenue potential for Type 6 engines are high in demand for large-scale emergencies. They bring revenue back to the city through mutual aid agreements. Lucas device, life-saving technology, provides consistent and effective chest compressions during CPR, improves chances of survival for cardiac arrest patients, frees personnel to manage other critical tasks during resuscitation efforts. The fire department, things they've been working on this year and future year, continuing, rescue stabilization and extrication equipment replacement. They plan actually in this budget to replace some outdated or worn tools used in vehicle extrications and rescues, which will help ensure safer, faster, and more effective operations during critical incidents and support compliance with modern safety standards. Station 41 bathroom improvements, health and safety compliance, remediation of mold growth to protect employee health, upgrades for ADA compliance, including shower and restroom stall improvements, supports increased staffing capacity enabled by Measure B through the CAL FIRE contract, and ensures facilities are aligned with health and safety regulations. Okay, Fund 4, Measure B, this is our public safety transaction and use tax fund. In this budget, we have proposed to pay off the fire engine Type 1, which will have an interest savings of approximately $15,000. We have funded the Viper contract with Merced County. There's money to have replacement rescue equipment for our fire department, vehicle upfitting for PD vehicles. It includes funding for the dispatcher, record supervisor, and 7 officers. It also includes funding for a mechanic agreement with Merced County. And then a portion of our CAL FIRE agreement goes into Measure B. This just shows you the numbers that are already in your budget, but it summarizes them basically for you. And so the single source of revenue for Measure B is sales and use tax. We do estimate some interest, but again, not knowing where interest goes, it's not something that you want to bank ongoing expenses for. And so our sales and use tax estimates using the data provided by our consultant is 5.2 million, and then the expenses totaling for all departments is 5.9 million. There are some one-time costs in there that we'll be using fund balance for. So when you take those away, your current ongoing expenses of 5.2 million equal your revenues. This all has been provided in the published draft budget in the agenda packet on May 22nd. We have our sales and use tax. We have the salaries that are paid for out of Fund 4 2020, which is the police department admin or public safety dispatcher and supervisor. And then 2021 is field ops. And 2021 is still field ops. And then 2030 is the fire department portion of Measure B. And so you see there, you will see a deficit because the outgoing expenses are larger than the incoming revenues. However, the one-time using existing fund balance brings your fund into balance. So outgoing expenses are in line with incoming revenues estimates. And then any positive that's forecasted is based on that interest earning, which would go into fund balance. Fund 50/50 is the CFD Public Safety Fund. So this fund was something we mentioned to you last year that it was something that you would want to consider for future policy. And we've reached that year now where the outgoing expenses are outpacing the incoming revenues. The revenues currently fund 3 positions, 1 police sergeant and 2 police officers. $100,000 has been budgeted for the CAL FIRE contract, which has been done over the last few years. And so we left all of the expenses in the fund so you can see them, and I'll get to the next slide, which will show them all. But it's important to note also that this should be a self-sustaining fund. So the revenues coming in should pay for the expenses going out. Because this year the expenses are estimated to be higher, there is either going to need to be the determination to transfer from the general fund, which has been accounted for. So that structural deficit of $350,000 includes this $160,000 transfer. Or we're going to move the expenses into the general fund. So either way you look at it, the general fund is picking up the difference. But there's something else to know about this fund, that it's not paying for all of the services provided. So the ordinance is written as such that administrative costs can be paid from this fund. The city historically has not done that. And so it's just something to keep in mind that although there are direct public safety salaries coming out, there still are other costs associated with providing those services that the general fund is picking up on the centralized services. So here's the CFD Fund 50/50 Public Safety expense side. And so we're looking at total expenditures of $883,000 for the 3 officer positions that are paid for. and then the 100,000 for the CAL FIRE contract. Bless you. No. Supposed to go back. There we go. Okay, so that 883,000 in expense, and if we go back to the revenue, yeah, spec one. Yeah, okay. We have balanced the fund by doing, you'll see the assessment district fees are forecasted at 721,760, small amount of interest maybe, and then the total revenue, 883, with the general fund transfer so that it can be a balanced fund. Okay. This just ties all the numbers. We've gone through all the public safety numbers, and this ties it all together in one slide for you. So you can see that for all the public safety departments, which are 2020, 2021, and 2030, these are the amounts for the proposed budget. So for general fund, 10.46 million, Measure B, 5.9 million, the CFD is 880,000. The AVA fund, which we do get a reimbursement on that's the abandoned vehicle fund, is around 30,000. And so of that amount, when you're looking at the total general fund expenses, which was our 21.1 million, public safety funds about 49.42% of that general fund cost. This is our current, our 25-26 CAL FIRE contract amount is $6,062,515, and this is the allocation out of that contract. Okay, we are almost done, and this is to make sure everybody's still with me. I have a little trivia question. Atwater Rexall Drugstore had a special way of alerting their customers when prescriptions were ready. The tradition lasted for 69 years. What was this tradition? Clanging of a cowbell would notify customers their prescriptions were ready, and that is according to the Atwater Historical Society. Okay, so we're now into our enterprise funds, and we just have a few slides left, and we're done. So our water enterprise fund, we didn't see any structural deficits in this fund. We were recommending the addition of 2 water systems operator to meet the current operation needs, and then also there are some water capital programs going on, the continued installation of the water meters, which is scheduled to wrap up in 25-26. Canal Creek Utility Crossing Project has some of the funding coming from water enterprise funds. And then in the 123 TCP fund, those are the items that you see come forward frequently for the carbon filter change out. So some of the water department achievements for fiscal year 24-25. Installed and upgraded water meters across the city to help residents better track usage and detect leaks early. Upgraded infrastructure at Well 20A to improve water pressure and system reliability. Performed regular maintenance on well sites and pump systems to help prevent breakdowns and keep water service running smoothly for residents. And then looking forward, finalize construction and bring Well 20A online to enhance citywide water distribution and pressure. The wastewater enterprise fund unfortunately wasn't as robust as the water fund in terms of the revenue and expenses. This year, with the revenues and expenses that have been estimated, we are looking at a structural deficit if those numbers came to fruition. And that is after we take out the one-time cost for the projects that are included. And so based on, there are no rate increases proposed in these estimates. And so based on the estimate, we're looking at a $462,652 structural deficit. Council recently took action to have Raftellus do up a new rate study with some numbers to take forward at a future date for your review and approval of setting a Prop 218 if needed. Sewer Department achievements over the current fiscal year include sewer blockages and performed emergency responses to minimize service disruptions, repaired sidewalk, curb, and gutter to restore proper drainage and ensure stormwater flows efficiently to the storm drain system. And looking forward, address additional drainage problem areas throughout the city to prevent flooding and improve stormwater management. Our Sanitation Enterprise Fund, we have our expenses very close to our revenues, so that's good. Our estimated revenues are $5,048,000 and our estimated expenses $5,021,000. We are entering into the third year of agreement with Mid-Valley Disposal, and there is a rate increase which has already been approved in the 218 that will go into effect 7/1. Okay, so just 2 more slides. Before I wrap it up, I just want to say thank you very much to the city manager and to the executive management team. They've been very respectful with time, and anytime I need some information, they know it's a drop everything and get it to me, so I appreciate that. And I also want to say thank you to my finance team. We have a little bit of a peculiar setup here in Atwater where the finance director is kind of the budget accountant, admin, and you know, kind of doing a few things at once. And what that does is it takes me out of commission to be there for my staff in areas that I'd like to be there for them, and especially this year with the move and staffing challenges that we have. So a personal thank you to my team for hanging in there. So the next things that we're doing looking ahead, we know that come mid-year, we may have some items that might have to come forward to you. And right now, the only thing that we can anticipate is mid-year utility adjustments. With the changing of departments going over to 1350 Broadway, there are some, we all as department pay utilities. And so we're working out some estimates on how much should be budgeted for that. We're just too new into it. So that might be something that you see come forward at mid-year. Revenue expense estimates, we take a look at them at mid-year. We'll take a look at any economic changes that might be affecting our operating budgets. And then any strategic planning items that could come about from approved strategic plan. Those might be for future considerations. And then again, throughout the year, if there's any policy reviews or updates, those will be coming forward for your approval. And so our next steps, our target date is to bring forward the final budget on Monday, June 9th. That's for our new fiscal year that starts July 1. And then as a reminder, we have strategic planning session coming up on May 31st, this Saturday, which is setting the goals. I put 3 to 5 years, but I think you're doing a 5-year plan. So to set council's new vision for the next 5 years. And that concludes my presentation. And I'll turn it back over to Mayor Nelson.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. It's enlightening, shall we say. Is there any council comments, questions?
Just have one. I know we've discussed it a few times, but it was in dealing with the fire department when we rent out the engines for critical incidents. We always get reimbursed for that or get paid. I know we had talked, I think I talked to Chief Pimentel before about creating like a vehicle replacement program, using that fund, that money to set aside for its own fund to kind of lessen the hit on the general fund going forward. I don't know if that's still a possibility, but I definitely think we should look into that.
Lisa?
I have a question about the RDA residuals. I know that at the last council meeting, we had talked about the fact that we have not issued any permits, housing permits. And then I noticed a significant jump. I think it went from 150 all the way to 560. So I'm just curious how we arrived at that number.
So for that number, we looked back at the last couple of years of what we're actually getting in. And so I think what had occurred is the number was actually budgeted a little low. But when you look at what has actually been received, it's higher than what was budgeted. And then also, just to confirm it, because I am fairly new here, and so you're just looking at that historical data, but to confirm it, I reached out to our property tax consultant through HDL, and his estimate was very much in line with mine. So I think what you're looking at there is just simply a difference of the budget to actuals. And a lot of times because if you look back even a couple years before that, it was low, and so it was appropriate to budget fairly low. You don't want to budget, you don't want to inflate. You want to budget very conservative. And so I think looking at that budget, it made sense, but then the actuals were coming in higher. So again, it is an estimate, but I had a level of comfort confirmed by the consultant.
I do have a question too about Castle with the wastewater enterprise fund. I know that the council approved, I'm looking at you, Anna, poor thing, but I should probably be looking at Justin. I know that we approved the interceptor replacement so that we could get some actuals on how much water we're taking in from Castle. Have we made progress with that project?
Yeah, we're working through submittals. They ordered the pump skid, but that won't be here until around December. So you're looking at February 2026 when that project will be completed.
The other thing that I have is more just of a comment, and I just want to note that we've talked about how we have seen some very positive results from community engagement activities, programs. Then I saw a pretty significant reduction in our investment in community programs, and then even some elimination of positions for our recreation leaders. And so from a community perspective, from a criminal justice perspective, I think it's important for us to keep those investments and provide programs and services for our young people. And so I was very sad to see that it was almost a $98,000 reduction, I believe, in community programs. And then again, I think I saw 3 part-time recreation leaders eliminated, which I don't like to see from a community standpoint.
Yeah, the cut from that was the drop-in program. So we've run drop-in for years, but now that the elementary schools are doing it, we're not getting anybody showing up. I think we had like 5 students last year, but we have 6 people working. So instead of doing the drop-in, we're going to go to like classes, as in like basketball classes or volleyball classes for the youth. So we can have less staff there, but then still offer something for the youth during the day.
And then Anna, I know that you had talked about if we leave money in accounts, we're seeing a pretty significant growth, but then we were talking about paying off the fire engine early. I'm sure you did, but did we do the math to ensure that it made sense to pay it off early to save 15 grand versus if we left the money in the account, or?
We know that we'll save 15. We don't know quite what we'll earn because we don't know what will happen with future interest rates. So and my math wouldn't be that sophisticated. I don't know how to predict what the interest rate would be if the fund balance would stay there. So what we do know, though, is through the payoff quote, we would save about $15,000 in interest. So that's where we were coming from, is take that savings now rather than not know what we possibly might earn on it. So.
Okay, anything else? Okay. So at this time, we're going to start the public comment period of this workshop. As a reminder, there's no time limit, and you can speak more than once. Please maintain decorum. When you're ready to speak, please come forward to the podium, state your name clearly for the record, and share your comments. Comments should remain focused on the proposed budget. And with that, I'm now opening public comment. Ladies first.
Hi, good evening, Linda Dash, Atwater. I have a lot of questions, but you don't want to be here all night. The castle sewer, when the castle closed, we being the city of Atwater, covered all of the sewer waste for years and years and years. Did the county and the city finally come to an agreement on what they owe the city of Atwater and what they're going to be paying us instead of the, what was it, $1,800 a month that was quoted a few months ago? I mean, that's because I noticed the sewer was in the red, and I think that probably helped it along a little bit. So is the county going to help us out a little bit? I mean, it's been going on for a lot of years. Nothing's happened, and we keep paying for their waste over there. And there's a lot of folks that's flushing toilets and running the water. That's a question. I only have 2 questions. So that's
Okay, well, let's, Chris, you mind if we answer that one first?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So kind of came up earlier. One of the things we need to know is what the flow is. And when we measure that, oftentimes you can back me up. I'll do this on my own. Our public works director had to step out. So oftentimes the sewage will flow backwards actually. So we'll have a negative number because of the flow in the pipe. So having that sewer interceptor installed and the part that we're waiting on, having that all put in, then we'll have an accurate number so that we can come to agreement.
I think maybe the county ought to give, the city of Atwater a good faith payment or something, because for a lot of years, when did the base close? 1995? And we've been footing the bill ever since then. Okay, so I kind of think that would be, and I know everybody has a hard time. Money's not available like it used to be, but I think that's very, very important. We all flush our toilets, and we all definitely pay for it. In fact, our rates are going to go up. So, please, as a taxpayer.
I think Chris has some additional information.
So I don't remember off the top of my head the exact number, but the county does pay us on a regular basis. But that amount is what is at question, I think, and that amount we'll have finer detail on it once we're able to measure that.
Okay, that would be great. My other thing is the old police chief that just is gone. He told us, even when I was on the oversight committee, we're going to buy dispatchers safe chairs, comfortable chairs, desks. They sit there for hours and hours and hours and, send calls to the officers. That was promised, but I want to know, did it happen? That was in this last budget. And also, vests and shields promised to our officers. Did that happen?
Good question. So we just got a quote for new dispatch furniture, and the state periodically gives what they call a refresh to dispatch centers, and they actually put money toward upgrades. So we're working with the state right now to find out if they will cover the upgrade. If not, then we'll budget that ourselves. But that is the one set of furniture that we are purchasing this year.
You see my face getting red? Because your former police chief told us when I sat on the oversight committee, it had been ordered and it was coming out of Measure B, never happened. And I believe if you have a dispatcher sitting there that might have a disability, it's very uncomfortable. So thank you very much for following up on that. And shame on that old guy that's gone.
Chief, did you want to speak on the vests as well? She was talking about vests.
All the vests for all the officers were replaced in this last year through a justice grant. So everybody has a new current updated vest. Shields I don't know about. I know we got ballistic helmets this year. I'm not sure about the shields.
Next.
One of the things that was discussed or brought up was about water meters. They're not water meters. I've brought this up countless times. We don't know what our numbers are. All I know is we pay a flat rate every month. So it's not calculated by way of like a register of getting water. If we did that, then, and I've used this example before, if someone leaves their residence for a full month and doesn't turn on a drop of water out of there, they come home to the same, what, $184 every single month. So, you know, to me, this is really disingenuous, people, to say that these are metering the water. It's not. So, you know, that's something that should be, you know, looked at. When it comes to the Type 1 fire truck, now don't get me wrong on this one. So don't jump down my back there, Mark. But it's my understanding, those of us on the Oversight Committee have been looking at these costs for several things within the fire department and coming out of Measure B. Type 1 fire truck, from the way it appears, is being fully funded out of Measure B. Is that correct? Okay. The ordinance is clear for Measure B, that it's supposed to be supplemental. And I don't know how it is that we can make that the primary sole source funding mechanism. That doesn't make any sense. It's disingenuous, again, to go and assume that Measure B should be the sole funding mechanism. That is not what Measure B was designed for. So when I heard also in the presentation that we're talking about police department upgrades, I think was the word, something along that. But the fact of the matter is that over the last 6-9 months, something like that, over the meetings that we've had, we're seeing as much as $50,000 go to flooring. How is that a Measure B authorized expenditure? Explain how that is in the public safety interest of this community. It isn't. So this is a misappropriation of funds, plain and simple. You'll disagree with me, you know, I'd go to the bank on that. But it's a fact. It's also a fact that you guys also, maybe you know, maybe you don't, council, but there was exercise equipment also purchased for the fire department, even though it was a memorandum that came from CAL FIRE to their firemen saying that they needed to get exercise equipment and or some type of a gym membership, this type of thing, so that they could work out or whatever. But it doesn't say anything in there that in a contractual agreement with a city or any kind of an entity that we would be responsible for whatever CAL FIRE was putting out as some authorization for their firefighters. Why are we paying for something like that? Why did Measure B pay for painting doors on a firehouse? How, again, I go back to what the ordinance says. It's very clear. Personnel and equipment. Now, I don't look at weight equipment or an exercise equipment and painting doors as equipment. I just don't. Neither do I see it as an expenditure that should be made for doing a general plan or ADA compliant showers or doors. All those sort of things, that is not in the public's best interest, and that's what the ordinance says, the benefit of the community. I don't feel any safer knowing that I have new weight equipment or whatever in the firehouse. No one should be feeling safer about that. I want that money to be used as the money was supposed to be allocated to do. Buy cops guns, bullets, cars, whatever they need, and fire guys, should, be on the same thing. But it shouldn't be the sole source of revenue to pay for those things. And I don't know how come the city, gets away with that each and every, day. And the thing of it is that we look at this in the oversight, and we look at it and say, this is an unauthorized expenditure, but yet it still goes on. And when do we know about it is after the money's already spent. So what's the good of oversight if we can't go and point it out to begin with? And so I heard a 49.2% of the general fund was the amount allocated for police and fire, correct? Okay. So out of that 49.2%, I didn't hear a specific line item, so much for police, so much for fire. I didn't see that out there. If it's there, I apologize, but I didn't hear it or see it. Measure B fund, or I'm sorry, Measure V funding. The Measure V fund, it sounds like it's been depleted. Is that correct? Or, what do we have left? Nobody. Okay. The Measure V.
Measure V is in Victor, or?
Yes.
Oh, so the road, he's talking about the road fund. So that money comes from MCAG.
Yes, I know where it comes from. I was one of the authors. Go ahead.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can look into that.
Okay.
He's wondering how much is in the fund balance for Measure V. Yeah, we could find out. Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess maybe the question, rather than what the fund balance is what's the budgetary outlook for Measure V? What is the dollar amount for that? And also with SB1 and the gas tax and other stuff. I mean, I drive around the city right now, guys, and Fruitland's been getting a spotlight shined on it, but meanwhile, you go and drive around this city and you can't see the center lines in the roads, the reflector buttons are shot. I mean, so where's the money? What are we doing with it? What are we allocating for that? I didn't hear any mention of we're going to dedicate X amount of dollars for doing that. Should that not be part of the budget on a large scale?
So we're actually going to have, and we had this go to the Planning Commission at their meeting last week, but the capital improvement program list, it shows the different funding sources for different capital projects. And the plan is to bring that to the city council meeting, I believe, on June 9th. So we do have that. It's in the draft packet as well, so you can find answers to those questions there.
Okay. All right. Well, it's just that it seems, if we're going to have a 15% increase, or let me rephrase that, 15% above projections, that seems to be the reoccurring number that I hear for Measure V, then we should have some pretty decent money to go down these streets and, do a simple thing like painting a line down the middle of the street. So if that can be taken care of, that's great. Okay, we'll wait until we do the Measure B.
Anybody else?
questions. I sent you an email regarding Stockton doing a thing on businesses which could increase revenue for the city. And I've also indicated that residential homes, somebody buying up several homes in Atwater, leaving these houses vacant for some time. And by implementing something could bring revenue into the city. So I don't know if you're going to look into that or not.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may. I did get an email from Keith, and he had an article that he shared dealing with the city of Stockton and something that they're implementing for commercial land uses that have gone vacant, and a fee or a fine that would be involved in leaving that vacant. It would increase over time to a maximum limit, so that the city would be encouraging these businesses to fill up. But I hadn't heard about the residential piece until you just mentioned it,
That
Keith.
come later on. I sent it to
So if I may continue for a second, so this idea is something that some cities are pursuing, and I've received a request from Councilmember Rochester to have the council consider this at a future meeting. And being busy with the budget and everything, we're looking at probably either the end of June or possibly the July meeting to look at that and consider that. So that's the plan, is to have the council look at that in the future.
Great. I just think it would bring us in some more revenue. I noticed on this presentation there was no request for additional police officers, manpower. Is that true?
I can answer that. So we were looking for any way that we could increase the number of police officers that we have on our force. And as we went through the budget and seeing that the Measure B portion was balanced out, and seeing that we still had a structural deficit in the general fund, we decided that the best way that we could move forward was to not increase that structural deficit, but to basically we need to heal that structural deficit, and once we have the funds, then that's an important thing that we're going to consider is into the future. And also share that positions, the question of positions is a great topic to talk about on Saturday when we have our strategic plan workshop, so we can look into the future over the next 5 years. What are the positions that are required in order for us to accomplish the goals and objectives that we have in our strategic plan, however that lands. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right. And one last thing. What is the balance in the Measure B fund? Is that roughly over $2 million?
I don't have current balance. I don't have our computer system with us, but I can tell you what the proposed projected balance will be at the end of fiscal year 25-26, because I have that document here. So at the end of fiscal year 24, and this is still an unaudited number, the fund balance was $3,072,000. And then in the current fiscal year of 24-25, when we end this current fiscal year, the projected fund balance was $2.3 million. So that's a number that will change, but that just gives you an idea of what was projected. And then after fiscal year 25-26, so after the next fiscal year, the projected fund balance would be $1.6 million.
I'm not going to go back over everything that Mr. Price just said about Measure B, but I think the council really needs to take a look at how this money is being spent, what the purpose of this Measure B funds were for, what the people voted for. As most of y'all know, that I've done everything I can to educate people and everything about Measure B. The matter's still in the hands of the district attorney's office on how this money should be spent, because I don't feel that it's being spent on what the people voted for. And to see that we're not asking for additional officers, that we got rid of 2 police officers in the last budget. We unfunded CSO and a code enforcement officer. That's what this money should be used for. And I hope that you guys really look at when we're spending stuff on roof repairs and doors and walls, painting walls and weight equipment. I know you sent me an email regarding the weight equipment saying that was part of the contract, and it's not. There's no place in the contract between the Atwater and the fire department said that you had to provide weight equipment. And the MOU with the fire department said that CAL FIRE would pay for equipment needed. So I think the council really needs to look at when they're spending Measure B money and use it the proper way. Thanks.
Yeah, you can come back up.
Okay, Measure B, that's near and dear to my heart as law enforcement is. You know, and I noticed on Measure B printout that the city of Atwater paid over $650,000 to an old past due CalPERS bill. That's not going to keep our officers safe. You know, these are bills that the city couldn't pay years ago when they were spending money like there's no tomorrow. I think, and I'm $650,000, there's a couple cops. You know, and I know there's more, and I haven't seen the last Excel spreadsheet. If we've spent more money and, you know, trying to pay off an old debt, a past due debt, that's not what we raised, you know, the Measure B money for. We went out there and hit door to door, police officers, firefighters did, every weekend to get Measure B passed. And it was kind of like you gave some kids a bunch of candy and you opened the door to the candy store and wow, boy, we could just go, we can buy this and buy that. And I really, really blame the former police chief because that was all his idea. He was going to buy this, he was going to do that, he's going to do that. Nothing helped our officers. Our officers didn't benefit from that. We don't even have 2 additional police officers, which we do need, 1 per 1,000 population. And, you know, I think y'all live in the city limits. Some of you don't. You live in the county. But I feel safe, and I trust who's on the street now. They don't have enough. I mean, you have, we still have 26 sworn. Is that correct? 26 sworn. My husband retired from Atwater Police Department in 1982 after 20-some crazy years. There was 26 sworn there in 1982. We're back to the old days, guys. And crime isn't like the old days. These guys need some help, and I think it's time you quit paying old bad bills, take it out of your general fund, start paying what we made that Measure B to work for, to support our cops. Okay, thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? Okay, see nobody else come forward. I'm going to close public comment. Thank you all for your feedback. Appreciate that. Are there any further comments or questions from the council?
I have more of a question.
Go for it.
So from this budget workshop, Anna and Chris, will you take the feedback back and consider some of the requests that have been made today to see if potentially there could be some ability to potentially, I don't know, save some recreation positions or community programming or something of that nature? Is that what's going to happen? I just want everybody to have like a realistic expectation from this.
I think at this point, I mean, we can consider the feedback, and we also can consider the feedback that we receive at the strategic plan workshop, and then we can try to devise a way to move forward in the short term and the long term, because some things we'll be able to pivot on quicker than other things. And when it comes to positions, it may be a more methodical long-term approach, and it may involve like a budget amendment in the future. So even though it may not, we may not be able to scramble and make something happen for this budget, we can certainly take that feedback, especially at the strategic plan workshop when we figure out what's needed based on the objectives and goals that we have, into the future, make those changes as we can.
That makes sense. The only thing that I would say is that under the goals for the departments, if we're cutting in areas that, you know, for example, we wouldn't say as a goal for our recreation department is that we want to engage with the community or bolster our community engagement when we're cutting their budget pretty significantly. So I think it just needs to make sense for me. The other thing that I wrote down that one of the residents brought forward, which I would also like to see, is how are we going to prioritize the 20 sidewalks that are going to be repaired? Because I consistently hear residents complaining about our sidewalks, so I'd like to know how we're going to prioritize that. And then finally, just the roads. I would wholeheartedly agree that it is some of the streets that we have are pretty atrocious and that we're unable to see the lines, and just it's bad. So I would like to see us prioritize that and actually place that into the budget so that you know, the residents can know exactly what to expect. And then finally, I do have concerns about our police officers. I have had conversations with Chief McEachin about the radio situation. I have heard some concerns from officers who have lost the ability to communicate via their department-issued radio. They've actually had to ask a resident once to dial 911 for them. And that is definitely not acceptable for our police, and I would never ever want any of our officers to ever be injured as a result of not being able to communicate via their department-issued radio, so that is something of concern.
Chief, I think we talked about that at a previous meeting last month or something. That question came up. And you said all the radios were all great.
I don't think I used the word great. Our radios work. We are working with the county. The county is, for several years now, from back in my time with Dos Palos, Idaho, there was discussions of upgrading the whole radio system countywide. And that's still an ongoing process, and we are still part of that project. It's just not come to fruition yet, but they are working on that.
But we do have new handhelds.
We do.
Okay. Yeah. That supposedly work. Okay. Have you gotten enough feedback to kind of have a direction to go for Saturday?
Yeah, and for June 9th, yeah.
And June 9th?
Yep. Together, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, there's no action to be taken on this item. But we are having a strategic plan workshop on Saturday at the community center starting at 9, going to noon. So you're all encouraged to come there as well. All right, so now we're on to Item 8, review of the draft program guidelines and public safety expenditure plan. Chris.
Yeah, so I am going to do just a quick verbal presentation on this. The plan is included in the packet, and the idea for this plan, well, let me just back up. In the past, the public safety expenditure plan has been part of the budget. There's a page that titled Public Safety Expenditure Plan, and it goes into parts of the Measure B expenditures for police and fire within the budget. But looking at the plan, I had the idea to expound on it and make it a separate document that stands alone from the budget, but could help to clarify one of the categories that we're looking at that we often get questions about in Measure B, the ordinance. So there are 3 categories in the ordinance. The first is, and these are types of categories that Measure B would be appropriate for use. The first is equipment and apparatus. The second is salaries and benefits. And the third is other police protection service expenses or other fire protection service expenses. And that word other, I think I wasn't here at the time that the language was drafted or that it was used from the previous measure, but it seems very broad to use the word other. And because we've received a lot of questions about this from the community and even at the oversight committee meetings, I think it would be a good idea for the council to review this draft. This is a draft. There's no expectation for this public safety expenditure plan to be approved tonight. This is more of an introduction and to get feedback from the city council and the public on how this plan might help clarify things. And so the word other could mean a lot of things to different people, and it could be broad or it could be narrow. And what I've done is worked with our public safety chiefs to outline examples of what other might mean. And the examples are fairly, they're broad, but they're also it's not an exhaustive list. So the point of this is not to necessarily create a list that only X, Y, and Z can be used for Measure B, but more so to just give examples to provide some guidance to staff when we're working on a budget document to propose, or when we're working on different things that we know kind of what the expectations are from the city council and from the community on what would be an appropriate expenditure specifically for the benefit of the residents of the city. And that's an important part of that other bracket, because it's not just other, it's other expenses that the city council deems necessary for the benefit of the residents. So that's the gist of this, and I can go through some of the examples if you like, but they're all prepared in the packet. In case you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does the council have any questions for Chris? Questions, comments?
You have comments, but I'll reserve them till the end.
Brian? Nothing? John? John? So you're going to reserve your comments for the end? Okay, that's fine. Okay, is there any public comment on this item? If so, please come forward.
Just to kind of hitchhike on what Linda Dash had said, this whole thing about the bulletproof vests that was something that had been going on. I've had police officers in confidence tell me they were wearing vests for a year that had been already expired. Yet we waited for a grant to be approved to go ahead and pay for that. Chief, I hope you don't do that. I sincerely hope you don't do that. These cops were out there, hanging out there. One even told me that he told his wife, when I get shot and killed with wearing this vest that's outdated, make sure that you get a good lawyer to sue this city to death. That's a fact. That is an exact example of what Measure B is intended for. That should have never waited for a grant. What if that grant had been turned down? Then what? That's insane. This business of, you know, doing the upgrades for buildings and stuff, here is the ordinance, guys. Here's the ordinance. There's not a single word in here that says anything about facility improvements or upgrades. Nothing. Not one single word. And I remember in the debate, or actually where we were coming on to the vote, and I remember, John, you had mentioned, are we going to spend this money willy-nilly? I think that was your exact words. Brian asked the city attorney, what is this specifically for? Equipment and personnel. That's what the answer that was got. Right there on the TV to go and look at anytime you want. The section here that it covers is obtaining, furnishing, operating, and or maintaining police protection equipment or apparatus, paying the salaries and benefits of police protection personnel, such other police protection service expenses as are deemed necessary by the city council for the benefit of the residents of the city. Pretty clear to me, guys. Pretty clear to me. Didn't say anything in there about going and putting down flooring or buying weight machines or anything else. I mean, what's next? And this thing says, by the direction of the city council. Have you guys actually approved that? Because I don't remember it ever being brought up. I didn't see it in consent calendar. I didn't see it anywhere. But it got approved because it got put before us in the oversight committee. Now that's just, you know, come on. What's next? A hot tub? Frozen yogurt machines? What's next? This is public's money, people. Take care of it. And it was one of these things that was put in there to be done as a protection for the citizens. And when you go and you have equipment like painting doors,
Jim.
weight machines,
Jim.
and everything else, and we got a cop shortage, and we don't put that money towards there, shame on you.
Okay, anybody else?
Just to go back what I said before. City council, you have a job to do. And one job is to look at this Measure B money. Make sure it's being spent on what we need. What we need is more cops. And when it comes with that, we need equipment. You know, if we're gonna have more personnel, we're gonna need more cars, more guns, more everything else. Fire department has its contracts, so you guys are bound by that. Remember, as it was said, for the benefit of the residents. So unless they're gonna open up the fire department's gym for all the residents, how's it a benefit to the residents? Okay, and that's what you guys have to decide. And when you're looking to approve these expenses, and it comes to Measure B expenses that are in the warrants, make sure that you're fully aware of what's that money being spent for. You know, because I feel sometimes, I look at this warrant list and I see Chase or Amazon and it gives no description what that money is being spent for. I hope the city council knows exactly what the money is being used for. Professional services, I see that constantly, professional services. I hope that the council, and I don't know, maybe you get a document that the public doesn't get that explains exactly what these expenses are for. You know, I sure like to see what some of these things, when it says professional services, what the money is actually for. As we go through this year, you know, I really hope that you look at what this money was intended for. Brian, what you were told this money would be used for specifically, and hopefully that will make your decisions a little bit easier on how to spend the money. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing nobody else come forward, I'm going to close public comment. Any other council questions, comments?
Okay, so I do have a question for our city attorney regarding the ordinance. I'm reading the ordinance, and I'm not going to repeat the police portion, but I will repeat, well, I'll actually read item B, boy, directly from the ordinance, and this is related to fire protection. Obtaining, furnishing, operating, and/or fire protection equipment or apparatus, paying the salaries and benefits of fire protection personnel, and such other fire protection service expenses, including capital expenses, as are deemed necessary by the City Council for the benefit of the residents of the city. When I look at police and I cross-compare, there is nothing in item A that states the capital expense. When I look up the definition of capital expense, it's defined as a large one-time cost that's incurred to acquire, improve, or extend the life of long-term assets, such as buildings, land, infrastructure, or equipment. Would does that cover what?
Yeah, that seems like a good general summary of capital expenses. I would say that's fair. Yeah.
Okay.
Was there something, I just want to make sure.
I just want to make sure that my thought, and I had never seen that before, that particular part of the difference between fire and police is that fire does have that piece added for capital expenses, and I'm not sure that we've ever had that discussion before, but there is the allowance, it appears, for that, and I'm assuming it's because fire, they have to live there, so that's why we would make those investments in the buildings for fire, right?
Yeah, that's probably part of the reason that's there. But it's explicitly in B, but when it says including capital expenses, it's offset by a comment before and after, and it's giving an example. And really, it's an example of the clause that precedes it in B, which is other such fire protection services, including as an example. Under A, it says such other, it has very parallel language, says such other fire protection services, and then it just skips that, kind of that parenthetical, but I wouldn't say that wouldn't be allowed for police either under A. It's just highlighting that is something, probably for the reasons you just cited, is explicitly a need. I think this boils down to the council, and what Chris's item tonight is the public safety expenditure plan. I think the key is bringing visibility to it, making it clear what the council's choices are on a yearly basis, so then the public has the ability to weigh in and say, listen, I think the key language in both of those, and it was highlighted by some of the members of the public, is as two things, as are deemed necessary by the city council. So it wasn't unfettered, and for the benefit of the residents of the city? Does it ultimately serve the benefit of the residents of the city, whether it's directly or indirectly? And I think that hopefully the public safety expenditure plan, as being something that is a separate document, the council can specifically get that feedback on a yearly basis, so it could be a little bit more of a visible and clear process.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor. So one thing to point out in the code, in the ordinance, Measure B, it says that the city council may amend this public safety expenditure plan from time to time. So there's not necessarily a requirement to look at this every year. This is a guiding document. It provides some guiding principles. And so having this in draft form, I'm hoping that we can get some direction on this to bring back a final version on June 9th, the city council meeting.
I do have some more comments related to, like, for example, the school resource officer programs. I know I've made that comment to you, Chris. I did notice a reduction in the budget for our SRO this year, which is confusing and concerning to me. But I don't believe that we should use Measure B money to fund the SRO programs. I feel like the Atwater Elementary School District should be funding that. I don't think that should be Measure B funded. The other comment that I have is related to the expenditures and how I kind of feel like we're not so much involved in the process of decision making. It's almost like it comes to us in this big compiled warrant list. And so what I definitely would like to see is an agenda item for when, if we're going to spend anything on other, so that we as a council can have a discussion about it, and then make a decision, make more of an informed decision. So whereas I see salaries and benefits, that's very clear, right? Not sure that I, as a council member, would have necessarily voted for exercise equipment for the fire department from Measure B. Not to say that I wouldn't want the firefighters to have exercise equipment. I'm just using that as an example. So I just would, as a council member, I would like for us to have more of a say before we're spending the money, and it to be placed as agenda items. And that way, if the public has a question or they have an issue, they can come directly to us as a council, and we hold that responsibility, making that decision prior to.
Mayor, if I may. So the way that expenditures have happened in the past has been that, well, what we'd like to see is that the council to set the budget and the vision and the policy for the city, and then for the administration, for the staff to execute on that vision. So having to come to the council for every expenditure out of Measure B will frankly bog things down considerably, because we have vendors that need to be paid. If there's for example, if there's a crime that happens and there's a biohazard involved that needs to be cleaned up, there's emergencies that happen. So we'll need some guiding principles to follow. And that's the gist of this. That's the idea behind this, is to kind of understand council's vision so that we can execute that vision, not necessarily coming back and asking permission every time that we need to pay a vendor to clean up blood or to do X, Y, Z. Or if we need to buy a replacement gun for an officer, or if we need to, buy a tool or something for a fire, whatever it is, we need to be able to operate the city and pay for the bills based on the budget that the council sets, as well as the vision that the council is directing us to do. So having a document that kind of outlines some of the things, and by the way, I'm happy to take out the SRO thing. I think that makes sense to take that out. Of course, the school pays for that anyway. But to have that direction is going to be important for the city to operate.
So I think then what I would like to see as a council member is a list of what the expenditures would be. I'm curious if if my colleagues up here agree with all of these expenditures that are listed. I think it's important for us to have this discussion now because this is a, you know,